record this to the cloud. Okay, it's not being recorded. So if you want a recording, just ping me on Slack and I'll share the link with you once this is done. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, that's a really good question. So the way that our classes and our functions are invoked in the background, we can think of that as happening here when we include them as children, either when we pass them into to React DOM.render or then when we include them subsequently as children amongst our other components. So now let's go back and look at app. Of course, I have my silly component. And just for, what if I did want to say something like props? And just to be clear, because this is not a great, this is a terrible example, right? It's sort of like, it's a little silly, it's very contrived, but let me turn this back into what you're actually going to see, slightly more anyway. Imagine that this is a div. And I'm only adding it to be a div in order to, just so that it makes sense that I have multiple lines of code here. And I might say something like, my name is, now, suppose that props is going to be an object with a property of name. So let's just say that we expect props to be like this. Props is name Howard or something like that, right? That's what we expect. So how would I get Howard to show up here? And it's just like you would in class, except we no longer use the keyword this.
Curly braces and props dot name.
Exactly. And so in order to actually get this prop, because right now I'm going to be getting an error message saying that it doesn't know what that thing is. It's going to say something like, I don't know what props are, right? You're referencing props and we don't see props anywhere. Whoa, whoa, easy there, React, that's a lot of red. So if we look though, uncaught violation, blah, 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 nothing was returned, et cetera, that's because somewhere in here will be a syntax error or a reference error. Somehow, somewhere, I imagine. Oh goodness, there's a lot of stuff there. So somewhere we screwed everything up. And I could just say inside of app, I'm going to pass down, and I'm just going to do it right in line. I'll say props, no, name equals, how do I want to do this? Props equals, let's do this. Okay, I'm just declaring my object here, and I'm going to refer to that thing here, name object. I'm calling it props. And let's see what happens now. Okay, terrible, terrible things are happening still. And now how might I try and debug this if I can't figure out why I'm not getting what I want?
Go to the dev tools.
Okay, so my dev tools aren't loading though because
it's crashing.
It's crashing. Wait, where did it go? What just happened? Did I just go? Oh. Okay, so dev tools aren't working. I do have a console though. What could I do with my console? Oh, I know what's going on here. Sorry, I actually didn't mean for this to happen. So what am I missing here? So I turned this into a multi-line and I forgot to add back in. Yes, thank you. You're exactly right. The return keyword. So now I'm going to add back in the return keyword. And now I should see different errors, right? All kinds of other horrible things will happen now. Or my name is React Animal. My name is nothing, right? And so now it's a good idea to have a look and see what in the world's happening. So if I inspect this thing, I want to know what's going on with my functional component. And there's some props, and it looks like name is Howard. What's the problem here? And this is like, this is a problem that can drive people crazy. Has anyone seen something like this and like you're really not sure what's going on?
Do we need a $ in front of the braces?
Where are we talking about here?
I'm wondering, yeah.
So we don't need one here for the reason that this is JSX rather than just plain old template string. It's a good thought for sure.
Can we display what's inside of props?
Say that again, sorry.
Can we show what is inside of props? What
Yes.
attributes available in props?
Yep, and that's, so if I inspect this thing, I can see here's my props. Oops, where was I? This guy. Here's my props. It's an object with a key of name and a value of Howard. I could also, optionally, there's a couple other things I could do. I could put a debugger in here or a console log. I'll put a debugger for now. Save that. I'll go back. When we save, we'll re-render. And we should catch in the debugger. At which point,
Do you need the backticks?
I don't need backticks. That's not, no, that's a good thought. But I'm in my debugger and I can now look at props. And I see props name Howard. What's the problem here?
Is this one of those where you have to put this? Oh, no,
don't-
it's not. This is
so-
not. Yeah, it's not referring to the...
So when do we need the keyword this and what kind of components?
In class.
Class components. This is a functional component. We're not going to use the keyword this for at least to reference props, and there is no referencing state unless you're using hooks. So here, let me. Hopefully, I'm going to change something. I'm going to say hamburger. I just had a burger for dinner, and so why can I do this? Why is this not really a problem? Or is it a problem? I'm going to play through this now, and we should catch on the debugger again. Maybe. There you go. What happened there? Okay. So now if I look in my console, I'm in my debugger. What are props now? Uncaught reference props is now defined. So in functional components, we can call the argument whatever we want. There it is, hamburger, right? So this is, and here's where I'm going to go back and forth between the statement, right? So this is just old JavaScript, and this is just an argument that's coming in. So whatever I'm grabbing here right now is, so props are passed as an object. So when I sorry, I switched back to so fast there. So I'll just split this off to the left. We can kind of see this a little bit better. When I pass this thing in right here, props is going to pass down an object. And so my props object, I'm grabbing name object, and here it is. So I'm nesting that a level deep. So we'll very often do something like this. If I go back to here, what if I do this? What does that do? Does that do anything for me? Or is that not going to be helpful?
Creates an object.
So what is this weird looking syntax anyway?
JSX.
So it's, what if I did this? So I'm going to say something like, I'm going to create an object. Say name Sally. Okay. What if I say const name equals object? Does that do anything? What's happening here? Why do I suddenly have a name variable that's pointing to Sally?
Well, you declare the object.
What does this syntax do? I did declare an object. What does this syntax do? A lot of students get really tripped up and frustrated when this is not React or JSX. And that's part of the problem, right? Because the curlies is like, is it JSX? Is it not JSX? JSX? I don't know. And that's okay. This is, anyone know what we might call this? Anybody? So we might call this object destructuring. And what I'm doing, this is a newer JavaScript syntax that we now have available to us. And what we're doing is I'm saying, I want to declare a variable of type const. I want to call it name. And I want to steal the name property from this object. And very frequently, that's what we're going to do. So actually, this thing doesn't have a name, a hamburger property, so this needs to be name. Okay, and so now I should be able possibly to just say, let's see what happens now if I do this.
How did you say you call it? How did you say you call it? It's deconstructing what?
Object deconstruction. Okay, so now let's see what happens if I look at my component here and I target on this thing. I now have my functional component. I now have props with name Howard. Okay. So let's see if we do, props.name. Continue my debugger there. And now I've got my name as Howard. So what I'm doing is I'm saying that I'm passing down this thing called props. It's going to come to me as an object. I want to destructure that object and grab it and call it just plain old props. And so now I can just reference the thing as an object called props and grab the name property from that object. Okay. I don't have to do this. I can just do this. Props. I can just call it props if I want to, like that. I'm just naming the argument. I can call this argument whatever I want. But now, strangely enough, this is going to look a little weird because if I look now at my React elements, notice that my name is gone. How did I end up with two apps? That seems weird. If I look at the functional component there and I open up props, props is now an object with name Howard, and what I'm going to have to do now is say props.name. Why do I do that twice? Because I actually called it props here. I should have called it something else here other than props, like name or something like that. So what I'm trying to highlight is a point of confusion that's common, which is what's the relationship between naming our props, passing them down as props, and in a functional component, naming this thing and or destructuring it. And if you're like, what in the world is happening? Play with it, right? Start here, change the name, see what happens on your components. Play with it, change the name, see what happens. And that's going to be like your best bet in terms of trying to figure out what's going on. Because sometimes we'll see this syntax, other times we'll see a different syntax, and don't get caught up on the syntax differences. Because a lot of times that's a tripping point that really doesn't need to be. Or if it is, just play with it a bunch of times until you start to see what the pattern that's happening there. Okay, so props.names is kind of annoying, and like this is this is a very contrived example, by the way. I was just trying to show a functional component. I don't need to call this props. I could call it something else, and it's weird and contrived. That's why the example doesn't really make a lot of sense here. But any questions about this?
Yeah, I'm working on this lab now. Does it have to get this involved, this solution?
No. I'm on a total sidetrack right now. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to show what a functional component looks like.
Okay.
This is just a basic functional component, probably the most basic functional component that you can think of. It's just taking a single argument as a prop, and props I get because that's what I named the argument. Props is what I called this thing that I'm passing down as props, and then name is the name of the property that I'm actually accessing. Okay, that's why we have props.props.name coming from the name that I'm passing down, what I call the argument, and then finally the actual property of the thing that I'm passing. I didn't mean to get on such a sidetrack with functional components, but this is a functional component. It's just literally a function. It could be it could be an arrow function or a regular old function declaration, or a named function expression. However you want to do it is fine. It'll all do the same thing. Okay, but let's get back to what we expected to see with our class component app, because I think that was kind of where we started the conversation. And we expected that this thing was a class component because it has its own state. So if a component has its own state, it's going to be a class component. That's different now with hooks. With hooks, you can add state to a functional component. We're not going to be dealing with hooks though. Wait to learn about hooks until you've graduated. Okay, this does because focus on learning one thing at a time, and I think hooks is a natural next step after you've learned this particular way of doing it, and then you'll see where hooks. And you actually will appreciate hooks more if you learn this first and then go into hooks. Not to mention, the official stance of React is not to go back and refactor all your existing React code, which means that all the React code in existence today is class and functional components. And then it's not going to necessarily be refactored ever, So you're going to need to know how to work on them as well as hooks. So another thing I would have expected to see by looking at the React Dev tools here, and when we looked at app, we saw that it had state here. I expected to see a state declaration, which can happen one of two ways, either at the top of the class component or in a constructor method. And let's see what we see. And sure enough, there's a constructor. And we see this.state equals. And this is the one and only time where we're going to directly declare our state as opposed to using set state. Okay, so we directly declare our state, as an object. Notice that it has two properties, pets and filters. Pets is an array and filters is an object. It's an object with another property called type, which is default pointing to all. And that's exactly what we see here. There's pets, an empty array. There's filters with a property of type pointing to the string all. Okay. So here's our filter. And every class component must have a render method. The render method must return JSX. Okay. Or a component, right? You can use create component and stuff like that, but don't. Just use JSX. That's the way to go here. Cool. So Sally asked a great component. Why do we see this sometimes coupled with the syntax here as opposed to this? Right, Sally, is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So component is just by as a guess, I would say component is a property of React. Okay, available as a property of React. And as such, I can destructure it, which is exactly what I'm doing here. So very similar to what we saw over here in terms of object destructuring. There's no magic here. This is not something special to React. This is straight old JavaScript. So React is going to be the export default from this thing, which is why I can simply say capital R React. That's going to be the default export. But React must have a property called component, because what we're doing with this thing is we're saying whatever that main export is, the main export is an object. It must have a property called component. In my current file, I'd like a variable called component that points to the value of whatever that thing is. So now I can simply do that, right? And so some people feel that this looks cleaner. So it's one or the other. You can either have this syntax like this. Actually, you could do it either way. So this will still work. This will still work because React.component still exists. That's where it came from. Okay, but we'll probably hopefully get a warning that says component was declared and never used. No, we don't get that warning? Come on, React, get with the program here. Oh yes, that is what it said. Okay, how about that? So component was defined but never used. It's a variable. We're literally defining a variable here. Okay. So if we're going to define it, we should use it, which means that this syntax will work. It's the same thing. Nothing different. Does that clear it up or make it more confusing, or how are we feeling about that?
So it goes either way.
What's that?
So you could use it in the top, but you don't need to do it in the class. Or if you don't have it in the import, you can use it within your class.
Yeah, the only reason I can refer to component by itself is because I'm literally declaring a variable up here with this syntax. That's what it does.
Right.
It pulls from the default export whatever property is under capital C component. We get a variable that points by that name that points to the value of that whatever was in that object. The same way I did when I said, what was it? So think about here. Let me just actually do it. I'll do this. I'll say React equals component fancy JS stuff here. Okay. So now, oh come on, don't do that to me. There we go. I could say const component equals, and I can destructure this thing. React. No. What did I do here? Const component. Oh, there we go. Const component equals React, or C equals object, sorry. So I'm saying take this object. Oh, no, I call it React, sorry. React is an object. I want the property of component from this object as a variable called component of type const. And that's what I get. Okay, and notice I can't change it because I use const. Component equals can't reassign. This is just ES6JS. Okay, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, think of React as like, React is going to be the default export, and it's going to have a property called component that we can grab this way. So I can use it this way, or if I, you know, I think I almost prefer this syntax personally, but that's just totally, as far as which is better, there, in my opinion, there is no better. Whichever way feels better to you here, use it. Sometimes it's really neat and handy to be able to destructure and have those variables so that you don't have to say React dot something dot something dot something. Okay, so back to the issue at hand, which I know I've spent a lot of time getting up to this point, but let's look at the lab. High level, we'll be working on several components that form the UI of an animal shelter adoption application. Users can filter for pets by type or adopt their pet of their choosing. Once a pet is adopted, they cannot unadopt it, no backsies. Okay, fine. There are several components. These can be found in components, of course. The app's initial state is already defined, has two children, filters, and pet browser. App should pass a callback prop. What is a callback prop? Why do we say callback prop? What's a callback? So imagine you hadn't learned React yet. Remember, so imagine that your mean-spirited, horrible JS assessor was assessing you on your React JavaScript assessment, and he said, "What's a callback?"
A function.
Yeah, it's a function. It's a function that's going to be called later. We're going to say, here, take this function and use it at your discretion. Whenever you see fit, you can call this function back. Hey, let's call it a callback. So when we say a callback prop, don't let the language fool you or like confuse, you know, don't make it more confusing than it is. We could just say pass a function as a property. It's literally what it means. We're going to pass a function, and this is going to be called onChangeType to filters. The callback needs to update the app's state.filters.type. So like this first part is literally, I mean, we need to call it onChangeType. So I need to declare a function, and I could do this in a couple different ways. The simplest way I could do this, and it won't necessarily be the right way. Well, somebody tell me, what is this? I keep saying what I'm going to do, and then I turn the question around. How do I do this? What does this mean? What does it mean to pass a callback prop called onChangeType to filters?
Can I say it? I worked on it this morning. So
yeah, say it.
I could say it. Okay, so my understanding is that app should have a function called onChange, and the child, which is filters, when there is a change of the type, so onChangeType is calling that function that is present in app.
Exactly that. OnChangeType is the name of this thing. And I'm going to show you a couple different things. First of all I need to pass in here, and now we're in JSX land, right? So the rules are different now with those curlies as they were a moment ago. Okay, and I know that can be confusing. Now the curlies just mean execute whatever's inside of these things in JavaScript. Okay, and that's a really important distinction that can be really, really tough because over here we're using it for object destructuring, and over here it's just JSX. And then over there it's just an object, and then it's a function body or you know what, it's just a regular old object being defined somewhere. So the curlies can sometimes lead to confusion. And but here it just means whatever's inside of this is now going to be plain old JavaScript. And plain old JavaScript, well, can I just say something like this? Is that allowed? Can I do this? Why am I getting a, oh, because I've got that. I mean, this is pretty useless, right? But I could just pass a function in line like this, right? This is an arrow function expression. But I like what I think Sarah, what you were saying maybe is instead of doing it this way, which now I'm going to lose track of what I have here. There we go. I think you were saying something like define it up here.
To define it, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm going to say, and by the way, the name doesn't have to match. I think it makes sense that it does, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I was quite confused about
Yeah,
matching the name or not, yeah.
I could call it some callback, right? But because when it gets passed down, this is going to be the name of the property. Okay. So let's just define it. So I'm going to say on change type. I'm just going to define it as a regular old function this way and say console.log on change type callback called. So if we see this thing invoked, then we should see this console log message. So then what I'm going to do, how would I then refer to this method inside of my JSX?
What did you do this dot on
Yes.
change type?
Yes, why do I have to say this?
So it retains,
So now we're inside of a class. So now, and now this is a little bit more of React looking and feeling a little bit different from other languages, or from regular old JavaScript to some extent anyway. This syntax though should look familiar, right? This is how we define our prototype methods in our classes, sort of in a sort of a standard fashion. But it does, so this onChange type doesn't just exist floating around in nowhere. It needs to be called on this. Why? Anyone know why?
Well, we're inside a class and the onChange type function belongs to that class.
So remember when you did something like this? Yes, and you're right, Ariana. So remember, like, you might have had something like class user, which had, you know, a constructor and all this other stuff in it. And then you did something like new user, et cetera, et cetera. And suppose that inside of user, you had like, say, name, console.log, and then something like, hello, my name is this.name, or something like that. Did I do this right? Oh man, okay, user's already been declared. Oh yeah, duh. Refresh this. Right. So how would I invoke say name? I can't just say name, right? That doesn't work. I need to create, oh, come on, I need to create a user object, basically. So I'm going to say new user, which this one doesn't take any arguments. It's kind of silly, dot say name, right? And you probably would have done something in your code like, you know, Fred equals new user, and you probably would have passed in Fred because that actually would have been used or something like that. And now we can do something like Fred.sayName. And of course, I didn't actually populate sayName with anything other than hello, so it's not, I should have just said greet instead of sayName. But I need an object in order to invoke that method. It's not a standalone function. It's a method inside of this class. The same thing is happening here. This onChange type is not just a standalone function that can be called willy-nilly by anybody. I'm inside of a class. I'm using the special class syntax to define this method in the first place. So I need to call it on an object of that type. And inside render, right, another one of these types of methods, I get this is pointing to an object of this particular component type, right? And so I have access then to these methods that way, right? Is that clear? Does that make sense? Whereas over here in my functional component, if I declared other functions, I could just name them, I could refer to them directly. Similar to the way I could refer to props directly, right? I didn't need a second, I didn't need some second way of reaching out to it. Any questions about that? And I know we're a few minutes past time. I actually have some time if anyone wants to stick around. Is there anyone who will stick around if we keep going a little bit further?
I can go with it.
Okay. If you have to leave, I'm not offended and I apologize.
Yeah, me too. I'm very interested. I would, if it's possible, to go and work with the other specs of this
Yeah, we could.
project. I would appreciate it very
Yeah,
much.
I have at least like an extra 15 or 20 minutes right now that I can. I should double check before I say something like that. Yes, I do. So I can move a little. I can work at least another 15 or 20 minutes if anyone else is willing to stick around right now.
I am.
Okay, so Sarah, at least it'll be you and me. And if you do have to drop off, it's absolutely no problem, and I understand this was the time slot. But yeah, but hang out with me if you can, if you want, of course. So I do have to use the keyword this. I can't just reference this thing out of the blue sky. But now that I have this thing, I can use it, right? And so I can reference it this dot onChange type. So I'm just passing a prop. The prop's going to have a name of onChange type, and onChange type is simply going to now point to a function. So let's find this thing. Why does my menu keep coming back? Go away, menu. Okay. So now if I use my React Dev Tools and I find this thing filter, where is it? Here-ish. There it is. And now I have a function as a prop. Why is this maximized? That's weird. Okay, onChange type. And if I look, I can see that my prop has this thing as a prop called onChange type, which is a function. Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Where do you see that?
So see how we have the two parentheses there? That tells me this is a function. So for example, suppose that, suppose I pass an empty array. Oops. I save this and I look over here. I'm still going to have a property called onChange type, but it's now going to be pointing to an array. In this case, an empty array. So if I go back to my filter, where's my filter? There it is. Now onChange type is an empty array. I could make it a string if I want to. I could say, howdy there. Okay, and I come back over. I'll still have a prop called onChange type, but it's now going to be a string. Okay. I can pass, these props can be anything you want them to be, anything you need them to be. So let's find filters again, there it is. Now it's howdy there as a string. But I want it to be that function. And so I do want it to be this dot onChange type, and now it will be once it refreshes again. And it's kind of annoying. I haven't figured out a way to lock like where the dev tools look. I don't know if there is a way, so you just have to kind of find it every time. You can also search, by the way. I could just type in filters each time and find the component that way. So that's another option here. Search or use the little target tool. Or just open up the tree and find it, but that can be a real pain. Anyway, now I have, and the fact that I see the little parentheses there is telling me onChange type is a function. Okay.
Howard, just a quick thing.
Yep.
Should we think of props as the key of the object or a key of a hash, and that in this case the function is the value onChange type? Is that a way to think of it, or I've got that totally?
Props are going to pass down as an object.
But they contain key value pairs.
Yes, they contain key value pairs. Yep. And so the name here onChange type will become a key or a property name of the object that you're passing along. And the name of the, like in a class component, when we pass this thing down to filters, let's see, let's find it. Where's my filters? There it is. So if I want to refer to the props here, how do I refer to the props here? Let's just ask the question.
Pass in props.
What's that?
Pass props.
What do I need to put in here to see my props?
Props.
Let's try it. It doesn't like that I just put the console log there, so I'll put it here instead. So let's check it out. Props is not defined. Why is props not defined? Any ideas? Here on line 6, props is not defined. Clearly, I'm passing props down. In this case, one of them is called onChange type. It's pointing to a function. That's a really good question that you raised, Sally. And like, what is this thing, props?
Oh, does it?
What are we missing here?
This dot props?
This. Why?
Because you have to refer to that particular object in the class.
Right. You're passing this thing down. When we're passing down to a class, this thing props is going to come in if we look at the console, as an object that's a property of an instance of this class, right?
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Yep.
So I can't just, again, similar to the way that I can't just refer to these things, it's kind of similar to the way that I can't just say on change type. When it comes to props, like you don't see props anywhere here. When you're passing down to a functional component, it's plain as day. It's simply passed in as an argument, just like any other argument gets passed in to any other function or method in JavaScript. But when it's a class component, it's a little bit different. So our props come in as property of this, or we will refer to them under as a property of this, okay? And so we need to say this dot props, and now we can see that it's an object, and it has a single property on change type, which is a function. Okay, so I need to reference it using this dot props. But it is now, but now I have it as a function. This dot props now is an object, and if I say this dot props dot on change type, I now have access, and I can see that this thing, if I stay inside of my console, I will see printed to the console a function. And now it's a function I can use whenever I see fit. That make sense?
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool. So, all right, so let's get kind of back to the instructions. By the way, let me see if I can run the tests in this. NPM tests, maybe. Is this going to tell me I have to be running on a different port or something? Let's see. Did you open something for me automatically? Okay, cool. They are running here. We have 3 passing tests already. That's great. Let's see. Do I not get a whatchamacallit, a URL to run and see this all the time? No? Does anybody, do we not get to see this? Do I have to run this every time in the browser? I guess I do, or in the terminal. Have you been running your tests in the terminal, or have you been seeing them in the browser? That's my question.
When I run tests, it's just being on the terminal, and if you just leave it, every time you save it, it reruns automatically.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so then I haven't actually been playing with the tests much recently, so.
Yeah, it doesn't go to browser.
So notice that we do have some callbacks. We do have some test passing. Should change the filter type. And this is what you were talking about, isn't it? Who was asking about this? Was it me? You were saying that you're passing tests and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, the test is passing, but from the result, you can see it's not filtering correctly on the browser.
So you do have to go for functionality besides just tests on these, because I don't think we're changing any filter types with my method, or with my method that just console logs something to the console. So I'm not sure the ins and outs of that particular test, or why it's looking like it's doing more than it seems to be. But anyway, so let's actually think about the functionality required here. Okay, the callback needs to update app's state.filters.type. Ooh, okay. So now what? How does that work? So first of all, where do I need to define what this function does? Do I need to do it here? And I should say method, what this method does. Do I need to define it here, or do I need to define it somewhere over where I'm passing it to?
Actually, the way I did it today is I defined it in app as a function before the render.
Yeah, just like right here?
Yes.
Yeah, and here's where, so what kind of code do I need? I need to update this thing here, right? And let's look, so let's just have a look at the, what are we getting here with this thing? It looks like I've got all cats, dogs, and micropigs. And it looks like all is the default. So I'm just going to write that down as a memo, all cats, dogs, and micropigs. Okay, so now what?
What we want to do is this set state.
Okay. What does set state take as an argument?
The key of the state that we want. Now, what happens if it's nested within other things? So we have to keep everything that it shouldn't be overriding that particular object.
Right.
So in this particular case, it is filters because type is within filters.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to keep everything before that. So how is it called? The spread, the spread, the spread operator, this state filters, we keep it, and then we just overwrite the type to the event target value.
Okay, so let's see what, so first of all, I want to go back to that first question. What do we pass as an argument to set state? I think you said the key, but let's be a little more general than that. I guess the key is going to be part of it, but we need to pass what? I can't just say like type whatever, right? What do I need here? Set state needs what as an argument?
An object.
An object, okay. And that's what these brackets represent, just a plain old object. So the brackets are used differently in different places and within React. Here I'm literally just declaring an argument inline. And what you mentioned, Sarah, is that I need, right now, onChangeType has nothing to do with pets, at least, or maybe it does down the road, or maybe it will. But for now, I just want to change the type property of the filters object, or the filters property, which is an object. So what does the spread operator look like? Three dots, right?
Yeah.
I can just say this dot state, and then filters, right? Is this what I should be doing?
I did it a little bit different. I just wrote filters.
Okay.
And filters colon, and then open the brackets, the curly brackets, and then I put the spread operator, this state filters, which means it keeps everything within filters.
Okay.
And just overwrites the type, the state filters, comma.
How many properties are there in the filters object?
Right now, type, I'm just wondering, only type,
If there's only one, I don't think I need the spread operator here. Would you agree with that?
Okay. So why did I do it? I don't know, I just thought, Okay, right, absolutely. Yeah. So type, it's the event target value.
Okay. What event?
Event, because we want to pass event on change type.
Okay. Like that?
Yeah.
Like that? Where does event come from? So now we need to reverse engineer this thing a little bit. Where is event target value going to be coming from?
From the screen, once we hit either all or cats or dogs, so we changed the type. It used to be all, and right now we're changing it to something else. So this is the event target value.
It feels like I'm missing something, right? I feel like I'm missing a link. Right now, if I save this, and I come back and try and see what's going on here, first I'm going to double check my, oops, not Redux, React. First I'm going to double check my, my component here and kind of look at it real quick and look at my, for example, my filter. There it is. And there's my onChangeType, but like, what's going to happen when I click around on this thing? And I look over here at my props and I don't see anything change. And if I look at my state of my app, I still see all, even though I've got micropig selected. What am I missing here?
This set state, no?
So you're not, so yes, I definitely want to call this .set state here. That's definitely true.
Don't you have to map through the array?
Pardon?
Do you have to map through the array of filters?
No, so filters is not an array. Pets is an array, and I will have to map through them or filter through them somehow at some point down the road. But filters is not an array. Filters is
An object.
an object. which has a property called type, and it looks to me like the type is implicitly anyway supposed to be all cats, dogs, or micropigs, and that's not really an array, but you're on the right track. How do I make this? What am I doing here? What action am I taking when I'm clicking through these filters? We have to keep it, and I have to just sort of remind everybody, we have to keep a tight grip on JavaScript, right? We're not deviating from JavaScript itself and the things that you've learned along the way. What am I doing here in terms of JavaScript?
You're clicking and doing a filter.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, and so like, what kind of an HTML element is this? If we kind of shift back away from React and forget that this is a component and all that stuff, there's still underlying it, there's still just HTML. What is this thing? It's a drop-down menu, right? What do we call drop-down menus in HTML? What kind of HTML elements are they?
Tables.
Pardon?
Table.
Not a table. It's not a table. Tables just display. I mean, you can have interactivity. You can have functionality inside of tables, but a drop-down menu is represented by an HTML element called a select. Okay, so and sure enough, we see it right here in the virtual DOM, and if we find it in the code, it lives in the filters component. Here it is. It's a select. So in terms of so the question is, like, if we are just using regular old JavaScript, and I wanted to grab this thing and add a listener to it, what kind of listener would I add to it?
Unselected, maybe?
So let's see if we can, and the beautiful thing is, there still is underlying this thing, just regular HTML. So this thing, the select has an ID of type. So if I go back to my console, I can say type equals document.get element by ID type. There it is. And I can add a listener right here. Add event listener, there it is. And what kind of, and this is what I want to know, like, what kind of listener do I want to add there? And right now I'll just say, like, I'll just put a silly function here that just says, like, console.log event.target. Okay. What kind of listener do I want? And it's not a click event. What do we call this?
Is that on change?
So on change. So yeah, I think on change in terms of React lingo. Let's see if change works. Whoops. Let's see if change is the thing that we need. There it is. Okay. So every time I change this, okay, if I didn't change it, then I don't get a console log. If I do change it, that's what's happening. So it's a change event. And with React, we call that onChange. So what do I need to do here? Because I don't want to just console log the event target. I actually want this to happen. But what do I need to do? So here, I found my select. And somebody said it, I think, was it Ariana?
Yeah.
What do I need to add to my select component here? Or to my select, I'll call this like a mini component. What do I need to add to this select thing here?
An onChange.
OnChange. Exactly. So now what do I want my onChange to point to?
The onChange type prop that has been passed down to it, so you can call onChange function.
That's exactly right. That's 100% correct. Everybody understand what Ariana just said? Does anyone not understand what Ariana just said? Don't hesitate to ask. What, you can even say, excuse me, what in the world's going on? That's totally legit. Everybody okay with that? So I'm passing a prop from, I need this function here to be available all the way down to this select. Why? Why don't I just put it here inside of this class? It's an important question. Why don't I just define onChange inside of this class here? Why is it all the way up here in app?
Because it needs to be with the parent.
Why? Yes, why?
Flow is top to bottom.
Yes, okay, and specifically here, what's going to change?
The state has to change, so we have to call it, the state in the app has to change.
What part of the state?
The type, instead of all, it's going to be
Yeah.
cats or dogs.
Okay, and that's my question, like why does this type state attribute living all the way up an app? Why don't we just move it down to filters?
Because it might apply to other children as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. Did everybody hear what Sarah said? Because something else, not just this component, some other component somewhere else relies on that piece of information. So this piece of state here has effects other than just this filter. And so that's why the state needs to live up there, so that because we don't know from you know, we can only go push things from the top down. We can't push things sort of back upstream, so to speak. And so if other components rely on what I choose for my filter, I can't just give that information to the filter alone. The app in this case needs to know about it at large. And so that's why I'm declaring this function here and passing it down instead of putting it over here on filters itself. So how do I refer to this thing, this property that's getting passed down? Excuse me, sorry. Anybody remember? We did it not too long ago.
This dot props dot on change type.
That's exactly it. Okay, I'm going to save that, and now, if we didn't break anything, which is never a guarantee, and we go look at our React Dev Tools, and I want to see app. So I'll find app. There it is. Here's my state. I want to open up and look at filters, and now if I click on cats, nothing happened. If I click on dogs, nothing happened. Okay, so something seems funky here. And now what I want to do is look and see, are we even getting here? This is where I would go as far as debugging. Let's throw a console log here and see if our callback is actually getting invoked. So I'm going to save that, go back. And so I use a combination of the console and the React Dev Tools. Once Redux is involved, I use all three. And which ones you use and how is going to be up to you. But I definitely want I want a console log now whenever I change this stuff. Okay, good. So here we go. Cannot read properties set state of undefined. And this, my friends, is an error that you should get used to. Kind of like no method name for nil class in Ruby. You know, you get comfortable with it after a while. You're like, oh, I know what this means. I can debug this. Here's another one. Cannot read properties set state of undefined. What does that mean?
Can we look at app 22? Line 22?
Yes. And I guarantee you it's going to be the first time we reference this dot state, or this dot set state, or this dot anything inside of onChange type. What is happening?
Did you not properly, because it's like a nested, the state it has as nested elements. I don't know if you accessed it correctly.
Okay, and I'm not actually, something's wrong. Basically this. So what does the error message tell us very specifically? What is undefined? Cannot read property set state of undefined. What is undefined here on line 22?
This.
So if I console.log this instead, save that, right before my error, I should see undefined. As soon as I actually click something, undefined, okay? So we're undefined here, why? Anybody remember this? There's kind of a little trick we have to take, and we have two options.
Are you talking about changing state or why this is undefined?
Why this is undefined.
I'm not sure.
This is undefined So I'm passing this function here down as a callback.
Oh, because it's, I know, because it's not an arrow function.
So this is not properly bound inside of this particular function when it's invoked. Because remember, this gets its value based on the how it's invoked, right? So remember, with functions, this doesn't get its value based on where it's defined or where it's declared. It gets its value based on the pattern we use to invoke. And so we don't really see how this thing gets invoked, but we're passing it down to some other class component somewhere, and somewhere back in React's language guts, when we clicked and we changed something, this thing was added as a callback, a listener callback to this select. And how it was invoked, I don't know, but it sure didn't get this pointing to class app. And in fact, in React, our classes run in strict mode, so if this isn't specifically defined on invocation, it will fall to undefined. It doesn't go to global anymore like it did, like it would if we're not in strict mode. So we are in strict mode here for the record. And so this, when not properly set, goes to undefined. And so to prevent that, we need to permanently bind the onChangeType function or method. I don't know if
we do an arrow function, would that work also?
It would work. So I am allowed to do this in React, where I simply change this to an arrow function.
David, open the door.
And the surrounding context where the arrow function is defined becomes this. And so we have to think, well, where is this thing defined? It's defined inside the body of class app, which means whatever this is inside of class app is what this is going to be inside of the onChange event, and that's what we want. The alternative, that's one way to do it. The alternative is to use bind in our constructor and say this dot onChangeType equals this dot onChangeType dot bind. So this thing already exists. I've defined it down here, but I'm reassigning it to be the bound version, always bound to this. So remember, once we bind a function, it can never change. It's this pointer. So now even when we pass this thing down to be used elsewhere by some other component, some other far off land, it is already bound, meaning this goes with it and can never be upset. Okay? The same thing effectively happens with an arrow function, but you have either option. So now we should see, and I'll show both ways. We should no longer, even if we have other errors, we shouldn't see that one anymore. So now if I click on dogs, what we saw before for this, I guess I don't have a console log here anymore. What happened? So now I guess I'll console. I don't want to console log this anymore, sorry. Okay, there we go. So I'll save that and console log, console log. Let's log our event, I guess. Our event.target. Okay. So now if I refresh this, I'm sorry, I'm used to refreshing. It automatically refreshed for us. And I should see, if I click on cats, there's my select. And so what is its value? Well, its value is going to be whatever is selected. So if I type in value and save it, one more time, I should be able to come in here, and anytime I change this, we invoke that callback function. And now I see there's dog. Now I see there's micropig. Where are these values coming from, by the way? It doesn't match exactly the syntax of what we see. M is capital here. Here it's lowercase. Why? Why is micropig capitalized in the select over here and not capitalized over here in the console log? Where would I look to see where that's coming from? It's coming from event.target.value. Event.target is the select. The value of the select is whatever is returned as the value attribute of the option that is selected. Here are my 4 options. Here are their 4 values. They're all lowercase, that's why we're seeing that. Even though what it says, the text, right, the inner text is capitalized and looks nice, but the value is coming through as lowercase strings, and that's why we're seeing that here. And that's also why that's what we want it to be here on line 26. So finally, for now anyway, like within this mini exercise, I guess, within this part of the exercise, if I go over to filter, if I click on app, here's my filters. It says all. If I click on cats, it now says cat. If I click on dogs, it now says dog. If I click on micropigs, we get micropig. Questions? Any questions at all? I'd love to get some feedback, like if anyone's like totally worse off than when we started, if anybody's feeling good. You don't have to tell me. You can message me privately. You can send me a Slack message or something like, hey, this is helpful. Hey, I'm not understanding this, whatever. And I don't see anyone, so I can't do the old, thumbs horizontal, thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. I can't tell.
It's good. It's good. It's helpful.
It's helpful. Okay. Okay.
Yep. No, it's really good. Because like I wasn't really tying all these things together. I was just like, this is the syntax, but I wasn't making the connection. So it's really good to see, like I wasn't aware of this React to be able to see the code as when we were running it. I was just guessing it. Mm-hmm. And I was not seeing the picture at all. So it's like, now I can go back and try to go through it all again to understand it better with all these things filled in.
Cool. And I have it, for the record, I have another study session scheduled tomorrow, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern. I'm happy to sort of take the next few steps within this lab. I do have to end the meeting now. But I'd be more than happy to sort of pick up from here and move forward within this particular lab, or talk about any other topics that pop up. And if you ever do want to see these recorded and then share it, I'm generally happy to do that. And now, by the way, if we look over at our tests, which I've run many, many times, I'm passing 4. So we managed to get one more thing passing there somewhere in there. I still haven't fetched pet, so I'm doing things totally out of order. I am actually changing the filter type, so I'm feeling better about that passing. I should fetch all pets by default and all pet types. So I don't have this all done yet, but we'll get there. We kind of went out of order from the tests, but that's okay in this case, I think. Cool. Any closing questions? What's that?
No, I was just saying this is great. So yeah, I have to check my schedule, but if I can, I'll definitely join the study group again tomorrow. Like unless you have other questions tomorrow, but if not, if you could continue, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can work because this is a great lab because there's a lot of good labs, but like this one, this is a nice one to talk about because it has a lot of different aspects that are really important to putting everything together on the React side, which is the idea of fetching our pets and then passing callbacks as well as just regular props down to children. So. Yeah. Well, I thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now. Maybe if I can figure out how to do that.
Thank you, Howard. It was